I mean, look, the sus is 10 questions, and that was too much. Now we have the UMUX, which was 4. Then we have the UMUX Lite, which is 2. And now we have the SEQ, which is 1. Like,
I had so much good stuff that I had to break this into more than one interview segment. If you haven't checked out the first part with Nikki and Ruby, go check that out and then come back here. So I want to switch gears a little bit, ladies. Okay, I have an assumption that in the UX field or in UX research, there's a lot of misunderstanding from our stakeholders, from our partners. What would you say is something that you encountered that they just really did not get it when it comes to UX?
you want to go, Nikki? You can go.
I mean,
Like, kind
I
of like,
love the awkward silences, by the way. I'm here for it.
Can you do a third episode that is just the silences? Look, the first thing that came to mind, like a cloud on a clear day, was you only spoke to 5 users. Like that, I feel like is the that we hear a lot of the time. And I think this is a perennial challenge of doing qualitative research in a quantitative world. And I think it's actually like an epistemological challenge because qualitative and quantitative research have a clash that comes down to their fundamental nature about how you construct knowledge and what you hold truth to be. And I know this is getting pretty esoteric, but I'm an arts graduate and this is what I learned in my degree. But essentially, qualitative research holds that the world is more of a constructivist point of view, that each of us construct our meaning and our truth according to like what is happening in our own perspective. This is obviously overly simplified. And quantitative research is objectivist, the idea that there is an objective singular truth. And our job as researchers is trying to triangulate methods to come at that singular truth. And at its core, quantitative research should be a phenomenon that can be observed. And that is why, for example, you could make a strong argument that MPS is in fact qualitative research because that is a stated preference, despite the fact there is a number attached to it. It is still a stated preference. And I could argue it is still qualitative. And so the challenge often happens when you're trying to marry together these 2 points of view that are essentially constructing the world in different ways. And we have an objectivist point of view and we have this constructivist point of view. It's like if I ask you what is red or what is green. And in your head, you might be thinking green, like that's like the smell of mint. That is a garden after it rains. That is like a poisonous frog. But I can give you a quantitative answer to what is green. I can look up a hex code right now and you're like, well, that's green. And we can all agree like this hex code, this is the thing that we're going to call green. But I can never really know that you're seeing green in the same way that I'm seeing green. It's constructed. All of this very lengthy explanation is to say it can be very difficult to be the person that comes to a meeting having spoken to only 5 or 10 or 15 users to try and put forward a point of view when you're up against someone that's like, yeah, but the churn rate's 5%. It can just be a very difficult thing. And I think if stakeholders are not willing to come to the table and have a discussion about the value of the insights you're providing from a qualitative perspective, it can lead to certain misunderstandings.
that was like the best explanation that I've ever heard about qual versus quant research. So I feel like you should patent that.
They're brilliant. Loved it.
That was like absolutely stunning. I'm just like, I don't know anything else now. That's all I need. Oh my gosh, please, we need that to be a soundbite that just lives on the internet that you can send to your stakeholders.
Yes. I'll get that to you, Ruby, so you can put that in your reel.
Yeah.
Thanks. Yeah.
So, Nikki, what do you find that people just don't understand about UX research or UX in general?
I'm going to piggyback slightly of the phrase of let's just run a survey. And surveys being one of the most misunderstood and misused methodologies in research. The problem with them is I think they appear easy. They're taught as easy, but are actually really difficult to do correctly, mainly because of wording and all of the things that we're trying to probably get from a survey aren't appropriate for a survey. And so I think we get in this trap of sending surveys to answer questions that aren't relevant for surveys. And because it's an easy method and because it's a fast method, we get into this space where we feel really pressured to do it because we're also, well, we're the experts and my stakeholder is telling me what to do to run this simple survey. And then I need to decide, do I pick door number 1 where I'm like, actually, surveys aren't easy? Do I pick door number 2 where I try and figure out how to make this into a survey? Do I pick door number 3 and say no to this request and say, instead, we need to do this, that, or the other thing and really piss somebody off and then run the risk of research taking too long as the outcome from this? So I think that with surveys, we need to be a lot more thoughtful and intentional about what we can actually get from surveys, which is pretty limited information versus what we're trying to force surveys to do, because we can get a lot of really bad data from surveys, which then will inform bad decision making, which then will come back and say, well, research is dumb. So yeah, I'm not a huge fan of surveys anymore. I hated them, loved them. And now I'm like, I don't really, you need to be used appropriately. And I actually don't feel enough of an expert on surveys to use them appropriately after like 11 years of doing this. And I think it takes a lot of time and effort to really truly understand and be able to articulate that to stakeholders in a way that they then understand.
To me, this is such a great example of like conscious incompetence, right? Like you get to the point where you actually understand how complicated this tool is and this methodology is. And so you would be one of the bets out there at writing a survey, but you know how like high the ceiling is actually. And so you can kind of see the difference. Whereas I think a lot of people are just like, boom, like I can just come up with a bunch of questions. Or now AI, of course, enables you to write a survey in like 1 minute flat. And I just want to like shout out to all my psychology folks, because I think if a psych degree teaches you one thing, it teaches you about how much time and effort and thoughtfulness goes into crafting a really good survey. Because you could argue that a lot of psychological assessment tools are essentially surveys, but the amount of time that goes into each individual item, the order of the items, the things that are included, the things that are not included, and then, of course, all of the techniques on top of that in terms of the analysis of the responses is immense. And I feel like I developed a great respect for the tool of a survey through my psychology degree and a bunch of skills. But I agree with Nikki, like you see how much is kind of left and how much there is to go. And I think I can write a pretty good survey, but I know that there are people who have advanced degrees essentially in just like that area. And so it can feel like, yeah, like we need a lot more skill to do this well.
Yeah, and I always say, let's use surveys that are as validated and reliable because there's research done behind them, like the SAS, the system usability scale. Like that has probably not nearly as researched as most of the psychological assessments that are given, but like at least there is some research behind it. So let's try not to recreate something that has very little validity and reliability behind it. Let's try and utilize things that are already out there that have been researched. So survey questions that have been looked at and like gone through a bit of rigor rather than ChatGPT being like, oh, here's your survey question. And it's the worst in the world.
About surveys. I feel like 10 years ago, there was a lot of talk in the field of market research and presumably other forms of research as well about kind of the demise of the survey. So back in the day, I feel like in the 2010s, there were quite a lot of surveys that were done that were very long, like 10 minutes, 15 minutes, even 20 minutes of a survey, and they would be really detailed. And there could be some like amazing analysis done with those results, but the surveys were long. And at that time, there was a lot of talk about the fact this will not persist. They will be broken down into shorter, more kind of intercept surveys. We'll be using more Internet of Things to do like surveys in the moment. Like when someone just leaves the shop, we'll send them a survey just then, which felt incredibly futuristic back then. Do we think these predictions have been accurate, or are we still seeing long surveys being done? Is it like a both and rather than an either or? I'd be curious in both of your experiences and perceptions?
Sure, I'll go first. I agree with you. I do feel like they understand survey fatigue and they realize, hey, no one's going to sit down for 40 minutes and fill in this survey. So if we break it into smaller bits and chunk it, maybe we'll get some data out of it. So I am seeing that too, where you feel like you're just, hey, how was your experience today? NPS or whatever. I feel like it has trended toward that. I can't tell you the last time someone in my department or the company I was at sent out a very long survey to get a bunch of data.
I would say very similarly, I'm seeing its attention spans. We've gone from movies to YouTube videos to reels. And I think it's actually quite similar to that because I think people have that understanding of lack of attention span. The only place that I see longer surveys come through now are times where the subject matters to the participants to a larger degree. So this would be more in the medical based field is where I tend to see surveys. I also have seen surveys from companies that are more in the mental health space that tend to be a little bit longer. And I think that I see that like relationship of how I don't want to say important is the topic to the participant, but it's almost like that feeling, how engaged or how much does that topic impact that person? Health, pretty high up there versus, hey, the last TV that I bought, maybe a little bit less so. So I think that I've seen them still from those types of organizations. However, I think generally speaking, I mean, look, the sus is 10 questions and that was too much. Now we have the UMUX, which was 4. Then we have the UMUX Lite, which is 2. And now we have the SEQ, which is 1. Like,
I do think we're seeing this kind of paradigm shift, and I think has a lot to do
yeah.
with it. Like when I think of a survey, to me, my mental model of what a survey is, it's written. It's something I complete asynchronously. It's something that I am indicating answers to mainly through like checking boxes or clicking items or typing an answer. I don't tend to think of it as something that is verbal, although of course those do exist. Like back in the day, we had Cassie, the computer assisted telephone interview, which I'm
Yeah.
sure telemarketers are still out there doing them. But I feel like with AI, we have almost a blurring of that line. So there may be these platforms now where there is a prompt, but you answer it in the form of a video or you answer it in the form of an audio message that then is analyzed in a different way. And to me, that feels like kind of somewhere in between a qualitative interview and a survey. So I wonder if the paradigm is going to move towards something like synchronous versus asynchronous research in the future, rather than like quantitative versus like qualitative interviews.
Yeah, I remember when emoji surveys were cool. Like the emoji responses. And I see in an airport bathroom, how was your experience? And it's like an angry face and a happy face and a whatever face. I was like, the person trying to analyze that data, that poor person, that experience can range for a lot of different reasons, right? Like to try and attribute any sort of emotion to a bathroom in an airport, that's tough. But I love that idea of like the async versus the sync research. And I think that might be a nice way to kind of step away from the qual and quant, because I think that qual and quant can, like, cause a lot of issues.
Yeah,
Yes,
yeah. Oh, sorry, Jen. Yeah,
well, go ahead.
I really I think the paradigm that makes sense to me when I think about qual and quant is essentially like observational versus stated. And so to me, like quantitative research is going to take the form a lot more of something like data analytics, where we're looking at our product analytics, we're analyzing our funnel, we're looking at the like product metrics that sit across different flows in our products, or we're looking at even business metrics to some extent. But if we want to be taking that customer perspective, I really think the future of kind of quantitative customer research is going to sit a lot more in those types of domains. And then qualitative customer research, to me, sort of encompasses everything that's like stated, where we do our best to kind of unpack based on stated preferences. And of course, ideally, we triangulate across both of those to give us the richest understanding.
This was so good. I'm going to have to break it up again. And I'm going to have to make this 3 parts. Make sure that you check out the final interview portion of my time with Nikki and Ruby.